This boy was forbidden by his mother to show his talent. Turan was a sheep herder, but he hid an unbelievable secret. In the middle of a small village, since childhood, he was an insanely gifted mage. After losing his mother, he continued living his life. In a world where magic is worshipped, he discovered that his power was so great that he could bring the nobles of this world to their knees. When he was young, a boy said he was a mage. Then the monster must eat his magic, and his friend shouts that she's a monster who eats mages. The boy then moves his stick, hitting his friend hard on the forehead. She asks how he managed to hit her so hard, and the protagonist replies that monsters will lose to mages. The girl says that in that case, she wants to be a mage too, and it's not fair, while an old man watches them, commenting that they were quite energetic in the morning, as the two call out to Grandpa Rebus. The boy asks what it takes to become a mage, and Rebus replies that he can't become one just by wanting to. Mages are the pinnacle, those who rule humans from the highest hierarchy, being nobles and knights who have inherited the ability to use ancestral powers. Unfortunately, the two of them can't become mages, but a man questions how the elder could say such a thing to a child. But he wants to know if it's true anyway, and Rebus turns around questioning. The man says he heard another monster had appeared. Rebus replies that it's true. They say Rob came through the entrance last night. His whole body was covered in a black shadow, and it was a leopard the size of a house. But they shouldn't worry because the village chief went to the city to ask a mage for help. He'll definitely bring one back, and the monster will be subjugated. A mother touches her daughter's head, saying that for now, they can't go into the forest. They must also be careful because without a mage, taking a monster's life is practically impossible. The man asks if all the villagers know, and Rebus confirms, but the villager wants to know about him, the shepherd on Mount Hizaril, Turan, who was lying with his head on a sheep. The young man looks up at the sky, resting. He thinks that this is really boring. The same landscape every day. The same day over and over again. He says at this rate, he'll forget how to speak. Rebus appears and calls him a pathetic brat, because the sun hasn't even started to set, and he's already slacking off. Turan says he's blocking the sunlight, and his grandfather replies that he's rude. And he still resents him for that incident, but the protagonist asks about it, saying he must be talking about when his mother lost her life and he tried to sell her sheep. But yes, he still resents him for it, since he's not generous enough to share his mother's inheritance. They aren't close enough for greetings, so the old man can say what he wants and get lost. Rebus shouts that he's a little shit. Turan stares at him coldly and asks what he said. Rebus turns around, warning that a monster has appeared. They say it was a leopard the size of a house, and Rop found it, so he'll be back after warning the villagers. Turan says it's a serious problem, and Rebus says he doesn't seem scared even though he's the most likely target around here. And he doesn't know how much courage he has, but anyway, the village chief went to the city to ask a mage for help. He came here because he was worried about him, and Turan says he's not being very honest, and won't admit he came for the sheep and not for him. So he says that if the old man is done talking, he should get lost. His breath stank so much his nose was about to fall off. Rebus turns, huffing, and heads towards the village. Turan thinks about the monsters. They were beasts that possess mysterious powers and magic. If humans have mages, then beasts have monsters. A mage was coming to the backwater village because of a monster, so he could finally see one in person. But if a rural village chief is calling, there's a good chance it won't be anyone special, even if it's a mage. Still, he wants to see a mage and find out how strong they are. Turan catches a scent soon after. It awakens a memory in his mind, as it was the smell of blood, as dusk falls in the forest. Turan walks calmly soon after, and thinks he's sure it was this way. His trail finally comes to an end. Turan stops, and looks at the ground, showing no emotion, as he stood before Rebus's shattered body. Turan says he told him to be careful, but he went first, and thinks that the source of the blood smell was him, apparently. This wound couldn't have been made by a normal animal. It was definitely a monster. A growing pressure hits Turan's body. A paw with an eye on it approaches them. The leopard stands before the protagonist. Turan just turns to face it. Keeping his hands in his pockets, he wonders how strong a monster is. At home, a child wants to know if it's true that not even adults can defeat a monster, and his father tells him they are insanely strong. If normal adults like him went up against one, not even a bone would be left. The boy asks what will happen to their village now, but his father tells him not to worry, since the village chief will bring a mage and subjugate the monster. The boy asks if the mage won't lose and if he will punish the monster. His father confirms, as they are great beings born with magic in their bodies. They can take a monster's life with a single word. Turan continues to stare at the monster without reacting, but then he opens his mouth, using the word execute, and the leopard is thrown far away. The monster is surprised. The energy emanating from Turan was strange. The young man wonders if it didn't work. The leopard charges at him once more, so the protagonist uses the word for it to stop. The leopard stops its leap mid-air. Turan says he knew execute wouldn't work, but that stop isn't fully effective either. The leopard charges him again, grinding its teeth. Turan had moved to the other side. He says that in that case, he takes a stone from inside his jacket. Turan says a shepherd must do what a shepherd does. The leopard then charges toward him. The protagonist uses harden to reinforce the stone. Then he throws it into his sling. His eye begins to glow gold, and the protagonist imbues it with speed, spinning the sling right after. Turan starts running forward, and so he uses his final enchantment, Pierce, shooting it towards the monster. The stone closes in on it very quickly, piercing the leopard. The creature starts to bleed. His expression remained the same, and a rock behind the mountain explodes. The leopard lunges again with its claws. Turan says he was aiming. The stone, now high in the air, starts to move. The protagonist says his target was its head, causing a huge impact on the creature. Turan keeps looking at the landscape and says it was his first time using that on a monster, wondering if he should throw it in a hole or something, and wipes the blood from his face, saying the bastards from the village made him work for it. Turan was a mage, as you might have noticed. He realized he had special abilities about 8 years ago. When he was 10 years old, he made things in his house levitate just by raising his hand. Young Turan turns to his mother and tells her to look at the flying wood, but his mother just drops her staff on the floor. The memories of that day are fresh in Turan's mind, where he says he could also generate fire and create wind. It was the first and last time his mother got angry with him. The woman holds the wood with her hands and calls her son, asking him to come talk to mommy, and asks if he wants her to live a long life, and the boy confirms. His mother says that he must then promise not to use this power anymore from now on. He can never use it in front of other people again. Turan asks why, and his mother wants to know if he remembers the story of the noblewoman and the knight. The protagonist says he remembers clearly. They call people with special powers mages, whether they are nobles or knights, but these two are different. Nobles are descendants of divine beings, the Freyans, who came down from the sky to save the ancient humans. Knights are descendants of nobles with mixed bloodlines. His mother says yes, and it seems he remembers. That's why nobles and knights are treated differently, even among mages. And she's about to tell him why he can't use this power. Turan inherited the powers of his father, a knight, and there are many evil nobles outside this city, nobles who treat knights like slaves. So he must remember this. No one can know that he is a mage. She asks him to promise. And just like that, 8 years passed. Turan continued to keep his mother's promise. The promise will not be broken. He has no desire to reveal himself as a mage, or to come down from the mountain. Later, Turan hears a noise at his house. Someone is banging on the door, shouting his name and telling him to come out. Turan then opens his door. The men stare at him coldly. Turan yawns as he summarizes what they said. They had accused him of taking Rabus's life. The man grabs his shirt and calls him shameless because he injured old Rabus and left him to be eaten by monsters. Turan remains expressionless, saying he knows why the man wants to frame him. The village's oldest man died alone. Instead of the young men who were afraid of the monster, he understands why they think this is the best way out. It was the easiest way to shift the blame from themselves to him. The man lunges forward with his fist. Turan dodges just by stepping back. He thinks about magic. This was very convenient for him. He headbutts the man in the nose. Turan thinks that if he truly wants something, it only costs mana. So he whispers for one of the men to fall. He doesn't need to make a mess. He just needed to keep his movements light, so it wouldn't be too obvious. Just enough so they wouldn't lose their lives. Turan is going to dominate them completely. One of the men charges with a stick, and the protagonist readies a punch. Just like that, the weapon goes flying. And for 8 years, it's been like this. Turan has hidden the fact that he is a mage, and he says they should have used this energy for Rabus's funeral. He asks if the women are there to fight too, but they immediately deny it, saying they came just to see him. Turan just tells them to take this idiot with them and goes back inside his house. He reflects that the village will fall into chaos again, and they'll use this as an excuse to rob him when he goes to trade. But it was fine. He just has to beat them until he gets a fair deal. He says he beat them up, so they shouldn't be back for a while. More knocks come at his door, and the protagonist says they must be crazy. The knocking on the door continues non-stop. The protagonist angrily opens the door, asking who it is and if they really want to die. But it was a man he didn't know. He apologizes and says he thought he could ask for a favor, but it seems he's come at a bad time. Turan thinks he's a traveler, so he apologizes and explains that some unpleasant people were just there a moment ago. He reflects that his mother taught him manners, but wonders if he did the right thing, since he's never treated anyone from this pathetic village well. Anyway, he was a traveler with a sword in this remote village. So he says, if you're looking for a tavern, but he cuts himself off and sighs, asking the man to come into his house. Some time passes, and he prepares a meal. He says he's not in a great situation, so there isn't much. The man replies that this is a banquet, but he surprised him, as he'd never met anyone from outside the village. Turan confirms this. He was born and raised on this mountain, living as a shepherd. It was rare for this village to have tourists. The man then looks at him, noticing he was drinking politely. He then says it's interesting. For someone who grew up here as a shepherd, he has good manners. His parents raised him well. Turan says he learned from his mother, and she passed away a few years ago from an illness. The man replies that she raised a fine son like him and is surely with the gods in a celestial palace. He thanks him again, while Turan thinks he's only living the way his mother taught him, but he wants to know what the man wants in this village. The man replies that he was asked a favor. They were looking for someone to deal with a monster leopard or something like that, introducing himself as a mage. Turan says he must be the mage their elder was talking about, and the man confirms it. He asks if he can ask something, because he senses a monster in the area but doesn't see one. What's stranger is that Turan knows about the village elder and the monster, yet he seems calm and composed. If the monster wanted a human, it would go after him. He asks if he isn't afraid. He seems too brave for a shepherd who's never left town, wanting to know who he really is. 8 years ago, Turan asks why no one can know he's a mage. His mother tells him it's because of the evil nobles. If nobles are shepherds like them, then knights are like the sheep. They might treat you with love, like family, but they can also sell or sacrifice you if necessary. She doesn't want that kind of life for her son, and he must want to keep living with his mommy. So he must remember that no one can know he's a mage, especially other mages, because if they find out, they'll separate them and turn the protagonist into a disposable sheep. To avoid being discovered, he might even have to take lives. The man asks why he isn't answering. His expression then turns serious. Then he says, "If you make a face like that, my joke gets boring." Turan thinks about it being a joke. He then apologizes, saying he doesn't have a good sense of humor. The man says no, he should be the one to apologize, as he thinks he scared him. Turan explains it was his first time hearing a joke about mages, so he was caught off guard. The man says his reaction was so great that he took the joke too far. Stopping to think, he realizes they haven't properly met. He says it's a pleasure and extends his hand. His name is Kiorn, and he's a nomad. Turan apologizes, saying he should have introduced himself earlier. He's a shepherd, and so he tells him his name. Some time passes, and he says he's turning 18 this year. Kiorn says he'll be 75. The protagonist says he doesn't look that old, and the man explains that mages age slower than normal people and live longer. Turan asks how he became a nomad. Kiorn says that after serving the Arabian family for 60 years, he left. He wanted to wander from place to place without stopping, chatting innocently with such a good person. He never realized it could be so much fun. Kiorn comments that it's getting late. Turan agrees, not even realizing the sun was rising. So, the mage decides he should go. This is an Arabian silver, the purest silver coin. It should cover the price of the meal. Turan says he'll accept it and hopes his hunt is successful. Kiorn tells him not to act like they'll never see each other again. He might visit more often if he's passing by. Outside the house, the sheep continue to scatter and graze. Turan uses the command for them to gather. The sheep raise their heads, following his command and moving toward him. The protagonist thinks it's the first time he's met another mage, but beyond that, he wonders how long it's been since he had such a good conversation. The lightness and humor in his speech were more natural than any adult he had ever met in his life. He was truly a good person. Turan had always thought that knights were just emotionless hunting dogs used by arrogant nobles. Anyway, he wonders how he's going to tell him that there are no more monsters on Mount Hisaril. Kiorn wanders through the forest, thinking this is strange. There are signs of a battle, but he can't sense any monster's presence. He wonders if the monster has already been hunted, and who the hell hunted it, or if the village chief called another mage besides him. Either way, it's a relief. If someone took the monster's life and things are fine, that's all that matters. But a pressure builds in his body. Kiorn spins around immediately. That monster from before is walking toward him. The leopard was alive, even with its head split open. Kiorn recognizes it as a monster's specter. He wonders who would do such a thing. The leopard's claw closes in on him, but Kiorn manages to dodge by moving back. He thinks that if you don't absorb or disperse the mana from a monster's corpse, it becomes a specter. Any monster hunting mage would know that. He leaps again to dodge the leopard's bite. Kiorn reflects that whoever killed this monster was definitely a mage, but he wonders why they let it become a specter. Maybe they didn't know this could happen, but he quickly dismisses the idea. A rookie knight who doesn't even know the basics couldn't kill a monster like this, so there might have been another intention. He prepares a lightning arrow, thinking he has to destroy it no matter what. The strike approaches with surprising speed, but it dissipates right in front of the leopard. Kiorn thinks his magic was nullified. This monster's mana is much stronger than his, but he notices the monster has vanished. He wonders if it was trying to nullify magic with magic, and where it went. The leopard emerges from the shadows behind him, materializing a moment later. It attempts a slash as Kiorn tries to defend himself. He thinks this monster is beyond the level of a mere knight. At least a low-rank noble would be needed. Kiorn retreats with his leg injured. He reflects that he never thought he'd find a specter of this level in a random village. You never know what life will throw at you. So this was it for him. He takes a deep breath. He thinks he won't just lose his life. If he's going to perish, he'll take it with him. He'll concentrate all his mana in his hand and pierce himself right as it attacks. The leopard lunges with its claw. While Kiorn concentrates all his mana in his hands, they both charge toward each other, but a light flies out from the middle of the forest, striking the creature in its midsection, intercepting it. Kiorn looks up, surprised. Then he looks at the ground, where half the creature has been destroyed. Turan asks if he's okay. Kiorn says a shepherd's joke was pretty good too. As the protagonist approaches him, Kiorn says, "So you're a mage," and asks why he didn't tell him. But he changes his question, wanting to know why he helped since he could have just left. Turan begins to answer him. Last night, with the wolf's body on the table, the protagonist had asked why he was going to such lengths, because he doesn't know what the village chief promised, but with his skills, he could easily make a lot more money. Kiorn replies that he pities the people, living on the frontier, trembling in fear with no protection. A mage, by nature, is someone who inherited the power of a god, so they should live with pride and protect helpless commoners. But not every mage thinks like him, and everyone has their own thoughts and way of life. Turan cracks a smile, asking if he didn't just say that everyone has their own way of life. The leopard tries another strike and they both retreat. Kiorn tells him to be careful, as they can't handle this monster. It's impossible to fight it unless you're a noble. They must report this to the village chief to help with the evacuation, because he'll hold it off here for as long as he can, thinking that he spoke with conviction, but he doesn't know how long he'll last. Turan replies that it's fine. If that last attack hit, then we're good. Kiorn wonders if that attack wasn't even his full strength. A young knight hiding in the mountains can hunt a specter that would trouble nobles. This was the thought of the veteran knight Kiorn. What he was seeing now wasn't just a connection he'd made in a rural village, nor was it the courage of a young knight who had fled from the nobles. This scene before his eyes could be the beginning of a mage who would turn the world upside down. And Turan says he's always been curious about his own limits. Stones begin to levitate around him. Kiorn says he won't let him do it. No matter how amazing his talent might be, this opponent is strong. They have to join forces. But the leopard lunges with its claw. However, a strike is launched, intercepting the monster. Kiorn thinks, no, now I'm just in the way. I couldn't even react to that last attack. He's useless. What he needs to do now is to ensure the flourishing of Turan's talent, who unleashes an insane spell against the monster. The protagonist says, "This is crap, because it's not working at all." He dodges a strike. Kiorn says he can't kill a specter with physical attacks. The protagonist retreats, wondering how to execute it. Then Kiorn tells him to try using fire, or electric-type powers. An arc of fire forms just above the leopard. Turan says it's not working, and Kiorn replies that's not the point. To apply a mage's power to another living being, establishing a good causality is a basic requirement. Maybe he doesn't even know the basics of magic. Then he has a hypothesis. He wonders if it was him who killed the monster and let it become a specter. And if so, that means Turan has never absorbed mana in his life. Shouting for him not just to make the fire, but to shoot it afterward while thinking, he's already this strong, Turan backs away from the monster's attacks, creating pure fire in his hand. Kiorn thinks that for a mage, lighting a fire shouldn't be hard, but controlling it requires separate training. However, the protagonist was able to do it immediately. Turan plants his feet firmly on the ground, launching the spell toward the creature. The monster begins to burn. Then it runs forward, out of control. Kiorn shouts for him to stay focused. He has to keep feeding mana into the fire so it doesn't go out. He needs to burn the entire specter. Turan continues to watch the spell with focus. Thus, he completely carbonizes the specter. Kiorn thinks, looks like we've won. This specter was very strong. Normally, the power of a noble would be needed in this situation, but the protagonist defeated it. Turan asks if it's over for good, and Kiorn keeps thinking that he was just a simple mountain shepherd with so much talent. Kiorn says that if he doesn't want to encounter another specter, he must absorb the mana first. The protagonist asks how to do that. Kiorn tells him to imagine he's draining something. Turan closes his eyes to concentrate. Green energy begins to seep out of the monster, flowing toward the protagonist's hand. Turan opens his eyes a moment later. His mana circuits are filled with the mana, and so the protagonist completes the drain. Kiorn says he'll feel a slight pleasure, and he can't believe he's seeing this with his own eyes. So this was really his first time absorbing mana. Turan confirms it. Kiorn thinks that after awakening, Mana grows slowly with age. The best way to get stronger is to defeat monsters or mages and absorb their mana. But this was Turan's first time absorbing mana, and yet he can already handle magic at this level. This means he has absurd innate potential. This means this young man was important. Kiorn calls the protagonist's name, saying he was very rude to him, and he wants to ask which house he belongs to. Turan calls his friend's name, telling him to clean up the blood first. Back at his house, his arm is bandaged. Kiorn apologizes for his rudeness in making someone so esteemed do such a thing, and says he can only apologize. Turan says he already told him he's not anyone special, just a shepherd who doesn't even know his father, so he should please stop. Kiorn agrees, but tells him not to look at him that way. He wants to know what a powerful mage like him is doing as a shepherd. He doesn't mean to be disrespectful, but it certainly doesn't suit him. Turan says it was a request from his mother. She told him to do this until the day she died. Kiorn is surprised to hear this. Turan explains that out in the world, there are nobles. If he's revealed as a mage, he'll be used and then discarded. Kiorn says she was wise. Turan admits he's surprised, as he thought Kiorn would call her overprotective, but Kiorn insists she wasn't wrong. Mages possess great powers, and that inevitably attracts conflict. About 20 years ago, there was a great war between two major noble houses. It was a war between his own House of Arabian and the great House of Zahar, where many people lost their lives. Out of roughly 3,000 knights from Arabian, nearly 1,000 died. That was almost a third of them. Sadly, everyone close to him was in that third. His friend Denver said he'd open a laundry shop after the war ended. His teacher, Hartman, said he still had so much to learn. And his beloved family was defeated by House Zahar, but he survived. That's why his mother was right, in a way. A knight's life can vanish much faster than a commoner's. But one thing she was wrong about was his aptitude. It's embarrassing to say this in his current state, but he is a very skilled knight. Yet Turan easily destroyed the specter that even he couldn't defeat. His potential isn't merely that of a knight. At the very least, it's on the level of nobles. And among them, his aptitude is top tier. Turan mentions his mother said his father was a knight and asks if that was a lie. Kiorn replies that there are cases where a noble is born to knights. In that sense, he thinks it would be best for him to leave this mountain and explore the world, because we humans are more than just knights and nobles, and we are not yet the masters of this world. He apologizes, saying he keeps forgetting that Turan doesn't know much about magic. A lineage ability is a trait that nobles inherit from their ancestors, the Freyans. Whether or not someone has such an ability is what separates nobles from knights. He asks if there were any spells that seemed incredibly easy, or a time he used an incredible magic or skill that didn't even seem to require mana to activate. Turan says it's not that he's strong. Kiorn replies that just by having mana, a mage's abilities become powerful. Turan says he has a good sense of smell and is good at throwing rocks. The teacher says that if his sense of smell is exceptionally good, it could be a lineage ability. Being skilled with thrown weapons is one of the characteristics of House Arabian, but it's a very common one. The protagonist asks him to tell him more. Sometime later, Kiorn says he understands. Turan asks why he's acting this way. The teacher says he thinks he knows which house is responsible for his abilities. Turan asks which house it was. Kiorn says it was a great house, known as the Pursuers or the Hunters, the House of Zahar, the one that fought in the war against the House of Arabian. The protagonist is devastated to hear this. He mentally repeats the words, the Great House of Zahar. He wonders if Kiorn is saying he's from the same bloodline as his enemies. He wonders what to say, if he should apologize for the actions of relatives he never even met. Kiorn then calls out to Turan, telling him not to worry. He didn't even participate in the war. Turan tries to argue, saying, but the teacher interrupts. He explains it was a matter for adults, and if they try to wash away blood with blood, the war will be eternal. Turan asks if he doesn't regret telling him to explore the world. Kiorn says that if he leaves the mountain and seeks power, he'll inevitably join the Zahar family, since he possesses extraordinary abilities. But he trusts him anyway. He was talking about the kindness in him since he saved him, even though it meant revealing an identity he had hidden his whole life. If someone like him reaches the top, maybe he can prevent a terrible war like that from happening again, but they don't have to talk about that, and it's not like he has decided to join the Zahar family or anything. Turan says his thoughts are very clear. He wants to try leaving the mountain. Kiorn says he's given it good thought. The protagonist clarifies that he doesn't mean right now. He'll leave when Kiorn's wound has healed. Kiorn calls him kind, saying he's just a little scratched up. He adds that Turan really is a good person. Inside the house, he explains that to use magic, one needs mana, which is why it's often called the key to omnipotence. The protagonist repeats the last phrase. Kiorn says it's not quite like the name suggests, but to use magic, you need mana that matches it. Turan asks what the standard is for mana to match magic. Kiorn says he'll explain now. The difficulty of mana is determined by 3 factors. First is lineage, second is affinity, and the third is causality. The first is determined by the lineage you were born into, which applies to most nobles who aren't knights. For example, it would be difficult for him to heal wounds with magic, but for those of the Ravista lineage from the south, it's something they can do without even training. That is the power of a lineage. Turan asks about affinity. Kiorn says he can also think of it as familiarity. It's the concept that a mage can perform certain tasks easily. Turan says he made the fireball by thinking of it as throwing a rock. Kiorn agrees immediately, saying that if he had made simpler flames, it wouldn't have achieved that speed or power. And the last and most important factor is causality, which even he doesn't fully understand. He asks what would happen if he tried to take his life directly using mana. Turan says some light would shine from his head. Kiorn confirms this is the phenomenon that occurs from a lack of causality. When there is no proper cause and the goal is too difficult, this rule is applied. Turan says he thinks he sort of understands. If he wanted to take his life instead of just spending mana and wishing for it, he would have to find a cause, like creating and throwing flames, because that's more natural than simply igniting something. Kiorn agrees, saying he could become a scholar instead of a mage. Turan mentions he can control animals according to his will, and asks if that's why beasts need something like that, but Kiorn says that's because of the mana. The two continue talking non-stop. The protagonist says magic isn't easy. Kiorn explains that an excellent mage knows not only how to use mana, but also the principles and situations behind it. Turan says that, come to think of it, he wants to know if the Zahar lineage has any special magic. Kiorn tells him they are skilled in stealth and pursuit. He tells him to give it a try, and the protagonist agrees. He thinks about not wanting to be seen by others, and for his dreams and scent to be undetectable. Smoke enters his mind. Turan asks if it worked. Kiorn looks at him in surprise, as the protagonist had completely disappeared. He then says that he succeeded, and that he can't see him. He bites the corner of his mouth, worried. The room was now empty, without Turan, but then he reappears in the space. Kiorn says it's been a while since he's seen that ability, but it's chilling. During the war, the knights were terrified of this power. Turan says it seems very unfair, but Kiorn tells him it doesn't make him invincible. He says he will now teach him some magic training methods. Turan questions if he isn't teaching too much to an enemy mage. Kiorn explains that he saved his life and took care of him, and as he said before, he trusts him completely with all his heart. Elsewhere, a merchant asks if he's going to sell the sheep and leave. He wants to know who's going to be the shepherd from now on, and how he could decide that without consulting them first. Turan says they should figure out how to find a shepherd themselves, and he doesn't care what they do with his belongings. He just hopes they'll buy the sheep at a fair price. If not, he'll just release them all and leave. They can try to catch them, but he warns it'll be very difficult. The village chief bites his lip, thinking that this bastard is a man of his word, and he won't gain anything by angering him. So he says that's fine. He understands. He tells him to leave and do as he pleases. And so, Kiorn and the protagonist continue on their way. Turan says that, come to think of it, those villagers still owe them compensation after everything. Kiorn replies that he doesn't want to accept it, since he was the one who captured the magical beast. The protagonist agrees and says that in that case, it was time for them to part ways. Kiorn apologizes for refusing his offer to travel together, but he feels better being alone. Turan tells him not to worry and thanks him for everything. His teacher tells him to take care, and the protagonist replies that he hopes they can meet again under happier circumstances. And so, the boy watched Kiorn's figure fade into the distance for a while. Only then did he realize why he didn't want the old knight to speak formally to him. Even though he never lacked affection from his mother, the boy had secretly always missed having a father figure, someone who could be his role model for the kind of man he wanted to become. On a path of stones, the sand shifts, making noise. Turan walks along, completely covered. Then he uses his hand to wipe his eyes, noticing something ahead of him. He realizes they are nomadic merchants who travel from village to village. And right now, that was a good thing, because he was going to ask for directions. One of the men asks who he is to block their path, and Turan explains that he's traveling alone and wants to know where the nearest city is. The man tells him that if he follows the road, he'll reach a city called Mure. Turan starts to walk away and thanks them for the information, but one of the men tells him to wait. He's just going to leave after getting what he wanted? When you receive something, you should give something in return. They point their swords at him and tell him to drop his bag. Turan says they're bandits, and the merchants ask what if they are. They'll call him careless since they're in a desert where no one would ever find his body. He should take off his backpack and leave while they're being nice. Killing him and stripping his clothes would be a lot of unnecessary work. Turan says he understands. They were bandits who even take people's lives. When he was at home with Turan and had produced fire magic above the cup, Kiorn had picked it up right away. Turan says he'll have to use them to practice his magic. The bandits burst out laughing, saying this lunatic was talking as if he were a mage. Turan then moves his hand, using wind magic to throw them away. He thought that instead of generating wind from the air, forming it with his hand and amplifying it used far less mana. He didn't know he could form such a strong wind with so little mana, and the bandits wonder what the hell that was. The protagonist opens his gourd and takes out a little water, creating a small ice stake. He points the magic at his opponents. The bandits' faces fill with fear, and so they are pierced by the magic. Turan thinks that this was supposed to be a useful spell when there's a lot of water nearby, but to be honest, just throwing rocks seems faster and stronger. The bandit says they didn't know he was a mage and begs for forgiveness, just this once. He says they'll give him anything he wants if he spares them, but other bandits advance from behind. Turan moves his foot, raising stakes that pierce the ones at his back. That bandit thinks it's impossible. They're all lifeless. Turan says he's only going to ask one thing, and the bandit says he'll answer anything. The protagonist asks why they attacked without a plan, since any traveler could be a mage. The man says it was because he bowed his head. Even when they spoke rudely to him, the protagonist had bowed and greeted them, so they assumed he was just an ordinary person. Turan thanks him, saying he taught him something very useful. The man asks if he's really going to spare him, but a drop of water was already above his head. Before, Kiorn had told him that from now on, Turan would meet many people, and there was something he wanted to say. He should never be merciful to pieces of shit like bandits, since they are the type of people who don't hesitate to hurt others for profit. The reason he was saying this was something Turan understood, because a life he spares out of pity could end up hurting good people. Turan says he thinks he's wasted too much time. The road the merchant bandits traveled and the wheel tracks that marked the sand left a thought etched in Turan's mind. He had taken people's lives. The protagonist felt guilty but couldn't let them go, remembering Kiorn's warning. People who could decide without hesitation to steal and take lives for profit could target others at any time. Like wheel tracks in the desert fading away as time passes, Turan's heart gradually calmed as he remembered Kiorn's teachings. And then he arrived in a new world. Turan takes in the view, surprised. He says, "So this was the place. The small city of Murray." Some people walk through the city. Turan thinks it's the first time he's seen so many people at once. Even the architecture was completely different compared to the village. Now it really felt like he was in a city. He then says, "Excuse me," to a fruit vendor. The man asks what he can do for him, and Turan explains he's not a customer. Kiorn had said that if he ever arrived in a city and needed to rest, he should look for a tavern, as there's usually always one around. The man tells him that if he's not buying fruit, he should leave. Turan wonders why he was so rude, and if there was some hidden rule in cities where you had to buy fruit before asking questions. So he asks how much it is, and the merchant says it's 2 dupit. He looks like a foreigner, so he might not know what that is, but paying with other coins was also valid. Turan hands over a coin and asks where he can find a tavern. The man tells him to go down the street, and behind the cloak shop, he'll see a blue roof. That place was the biggest tavern in the city. Lena, the tavern employee, welcomes him. She says he's a handsome customer, and Turan asks how much a night costs. She replies that it's 16 dupe, and the protagonist says he'll stay. More importantly, there's something he wants to ask. He wants to know if there are any monsters nearby with a bounty, and Lena questions him about it. Turan thinks he needs to kill monsters and absorb their mana while also earning money. He then asks why she isn't answering, and Lena calls him Sir. She says that nothing in this world is free. Sometime later, he asks about the city hall, wanting to know what it was. Lena is surprised he doesn't know what a city hall is, saying he really must be from the countryside. She explains that the city hall is where public affairs are handled, and the officials who work there are hired by the city's lord. It's probably already closed since the sun has set, and if he wants to find a hunting contract, he should go there tomorrow. She asks if he's a monster hunter, and Turan asks what that is. Lena explains that if a normal person hunts monsters, they become a mage, and asks if he wants to become one too. Of course, who would believe such a silly superstition? But a man touches his shoulder. He says it's a completely true fact, and he saw it with his own 2 eyes. Lena is surprised that Medan is alive, and the young man says he won't die until he becomes a mage. Turan is surprised that he touched his shoulder, and Medan apologizes. The protagonist asks if he can hear more about what he just said, and Medan asks if he means about becoming a mage. Mages get stronger by hunting monsters, and by the same principle, if a normal person defeats a monster, they become a mage. The 4 of them were hunting monsters to become mages. Turan asks if this means there's a mage among them, but the boys deny it, saying that in this city there's only the Lord and his 3 mages. But they want to know if he hunts monsters, since his equipment is so bad. Turan says he has a weapon and shows them the bag. Maidan points out it's a well-used slingshot. The protagonist explains it was good for shooting something the size of an egg, and Madan says it's good for hunting monster rabbits and foxes. Actually, they were going to say they need another marksman and want to know if he's interested in hunting with them. A smile spreads across Turan's face. He then refuses but thanks them, thinking there's no reason to hunt with them. It was a pretty chaotic day. He still can't believe he actually left the village. He wonders what's going to happen now, but a noise catches his attention. He questions who's at the door. Remembering Kiorn's words, he knows he must stay alert, even in a cave. The city wasn't safe. He must never let his guard down. Turan prepares a spell in his hand, then calmly opens the door, but he's surprised by what happens next. Lena asks if he was sleeping. She thought he might be cold, so she came to warm him up a bit. Turan asks what she means as the girl lets her hair down. She says it's exactly what it looks like. For a small amount of money, she'll do whatever he wants. Turan asks what if he doesn't want to. Lena tells him not to lie. It's written all over his face. But the protagonist immediately imitates a Buddha. The girl is astonished by this. Before, Kiorn had shouted at him not to do it. He always has to be careful with maids and prostitutes in taverns, since most of them have STIs. Mages have a resistance to diseases, so it's not a problem for them. But if he's not careful, he could pass it to another woman, so he shouldn't let desire control him. Turan thinks that cities are also hard to live in. First the tent, and now Lena. To think they'd put a price on small bits of information and conversation. Cities are truly ignorant. The protagonist can hear a man saying he was curious about something. He asks why Madan called that guy over earlier, since, to be honest, he seemed pretty useless. Another man agrees, adding that he talks too much, so he'd be perfect as bait. Midan explains that it's because the guy reminds him of his younger self. Hearing that he hunts with a weapon like that worried him. If he's even 1% of what he claims to be, he'll survive. Turan smiles and turns away, thinking that maybe the city isn't so ignorant after all. Earlier the other day, at the city hall, a secretary offers his greetings and asks how he can help. Turan asks if he's an official, and the clerk retorts, asking if he looks like one. The protagonist says he came to hunt monsters. Kiorn had told him that the world wouldn't be kind to him, because if you think about it, there's no reason for it to be. If you want people to treat you well, the method was simple. You must reveal you're a mage, and then normal people would treat you like a deity. The protagonist picks up a poster. The secretary tells him to look at it and put it back. Turan asks about a crow monster, and the secretary snaps back, asking if it looks like a cat to him. It was unlikely, but if he kills the monster, he must bring the corpse back to the city. If a mage doesn't disperse it with mana, it becomes a specter. If he kills the monster and abandons the body, it's a crime, and he'll be executed. Turan thinks to himself that he knows this, and he also knows what happens when a monster becomes a specter. He can't repeat that mistake. He then asks if knights don't hunt monsters, but the secretary says they don't have the spare time. The job of knights is to maintain public order in the city. Hunting monsters was for delinquents like him to handle. He says as Turan leaves that it looks like another body will be rotting outside the city, but the crow lies lifeless. Turan hands it over with just a hole in its chest. The secretary says it's impossible and asks how. He was able to bring it back so quickly, and did he kill it alone? The protagonist confirms it. He wants to know how to get the reward, and the other secretary says they'll give it to him. He thanks him for the hard work and tells him to get some rest. He notes that it's incredible because the wings are intact. He didn't even know it was possible to bring in a blade crow in this condition. Then he looks to the side. He wonders why he's still here. Turan asks if there are any more monsters to hunt. The secretary is surprised and tells him not to say he can still hunt more. Later, Lena serves all the most expensive items on her menu. She says she never dreamed someone could defeat 30 monsters in 3 days. He must have earned a lot of money. The protagonist just eats calmly, saying that money wasn't his only goal. He reflects that, more precisely, his goal was the monster's mana. Thanks to that, he's become even stronger. Compared to when he was with Kiorn, his mana has increased a lot, but he can feel a limit. With only mana from weak monsters, he won't get any stronger. He then asks if she didn't happen to steal some of it, but Lena tells him he ate everything himself. He was skinny, but ate like a pig. The cook says it's been a while since he prepared a feast like this, so he's glad he enjoyed it. Turan says it was delicious, and the cook tells him it'll be even better next time. But a delinquent pulls the protagonist's hood. He says he's eating something so delicious all by himself, and he heard this skinny guy has been making good money lately. He asks how about donating some to them, but the protagonist slaps his hand across his face. The other man insults the protagonist for that. Turan asks if he didn't want a donation. One of the others throws a punch, but the protagonist just dodges it, striking him in the face with his elbow. One of the bandits grabs a stool and runs at him, but Turan blocks it with his hand, preparing to flick him on the forehead. And with that, he takes down another man. Lena keeps repeating for him not to fight in her tavern again. Later, Midan apologizes. He scolded them both, and it will never happen again. They were really short on money lately, and he thinks they got jealous when they saw him. He tells the two to apologize, and they obey. Turan asks if things are tough, and Midan says their options are limited. In about 3 days, they won't be able to pay for their lodging, but that's their problem. The protagonist offers a pouch of coins. Midan asks why he's doing this, and the protagonist says it's payment for the kindness he showed when he tried to recruit him, and nothing is free. He must provide information in return. Midan says he has plenty of information and will tell him everything right now. Later the next day in the city, Turan walks calmly through the forest, thinking this might be his last hunt in this city. Midan gave him information about the next town, so it's time to go. There was much more useful information than he expected. Midan was a really good person. He wasn't as experienced as Kiorn, but that made him purer and kinder. Then he suddenly senses something. He notices the smell, and he prays he's wrong. Then he spots a tree with a scratch mark on it. He looks at what's in front of him, a shattered body sitting against the tree. The protagonist recognizes it was someone from Midan's group. He then turns to the side. Another body was already lifeless, with 3 silver coins still beside it. He then wonders what happened to Midan. Then he hears some noises. Someone is talking about a rabbit, the one that was feeding on the corpses. A monster rabbit stalks the protagonist, its face distorted and strange. Turan gets up immediately. He then dodges a lightning-fast attack from the rabbit. He thinks to himself that it was fast. That blow almost hit him. He starts to spin his slingshot, using all his strength with a bit of mana. The stone is launched toward the rabbit, approaching and fragmenting into multiple shots, but the rabbit deflects them with its paws and ears. Turan thought he was used to defending against thrown attacks. The rabbit settles back on the ground, leaping towards him, but the rabbit is completely taken by surprise as the protagonist vanishes right after. The rabbit stops in midair as Turan appears behind it, having cast a spell. Plunging his dagger into the monster's neck, he backs away immediately, his presence returning to normal. The rabbit slams into a tree with its claws, slicing it in half with ease. It tears through several more as it keeps moving forward. The forest fills with smoke. The rabbit lets out a loud cry, looking up at the sky. Its blood starts to splatter. Then it falls to the ground, lifeless. Turan reveals his presence again, approaching the monstrous creature's corpse. Then he points his hand towards it, draining its mana with ease. Turan thought the amount of mana he was absorbing felt different. It was more than the leopard he'd encountered before. A voice says he can't believe it, that he was actually a mage. Turan agrees, and the man asks why he was hiding his identity. Turan asks if they have family to pass their belongings to, but the man says no, calling his boss's name. Midan had told him there's a big city nearby called Aurum, and it has a library. Turan asks what that is, and Midan explains it has thousands of books. The moment he said books, Turan seemed more interested, but he'd heard not everyone was allowed in. So Turan asks how to enter. Midan says that apparently only mages can, and Turan says he's decided. He's going to the city they mentioned. Turan says Midan's name, looking down, hoping he'll be happy there. Then Turan gets into a line. He felt almost embarrassed for being so impressed by the small town of Murray. The great city of Aurum was on another level. He didn't expect so many people to be trying to get into the city, and they were inspecting for wanted criminals. As expected of a large city, it has a more organized system. A voice tells him to stop. Turan asks what's wrong, but the man says entry is forbidden. He'd never seen such filthy clothes. He tells Turan he should at least clean himself up first. In the middle of the city, there was a tower covered in vines. So this must be the library Midan was talking about, Turan thought. It was huge and must have been built with magic. He approaches the front, saying he wants to enter, but the guard tells him it's exclusively for mages. Turan says he is a mage, and the guard becomes suspicious. The guard asks if he wants to die for impersonating a mage. He can't believe he's dealing with a lunatic like him. There's no way in hell someone like him is a mage. So he starts using a type of magic. Kiorn had explained that mages can recognize each other by sensing one another's mana, and can even tell if the person is stronger than them. Turan opens his eyes then, unleashing all his mana towards that guard. The man can't take so much pressure. He falls to the ground and says it's okay. He thinks that Turan wasn't a normal mage, and this man was at least a noble. Then he introduces himself as Kenya, a knight of the House of Valius, and asks which house he is from. Turan asks if he has to say to get in, and Kenya says no. To use the library, he needs permission from the Master of Valius, and he will contact them. At the house, the protagonist takes a bath. He thought it would be a simple process. A maid approaches him and cleans his arm. Turan wonders how this happened. Then he asks them to stop. He asks if it's a problem if he washes himself, but the maid says that if they fail to attend to a guest, they will be punished. The protagonist tells them to do as they wish. Later, another maid is amazed. Turan asks what it is, and she covers her mouth. The protagonist asks if there's something on his face, but the woman says she got lost in his beauty and asks for forgiveness. Turan says there's nothing to forgive, and the woman asks him not to speak so casually, until a voice asks what this is, approaching him right after. The girl asks if he was the guest who arrived looking like a beggar. After a bath and good clothes, he looks like a prince, she says. A guard tells the young lady she shouldn't say that. Turan introduces himself, and Azella does the same. She asks which house, and the protagonist says that for personal reasons, he'd like to omit it. Azella says that's a shame. Thinking she'll play around a bit since he's hiding who he is, she releases her mana. Staring at the protagonist coldly, she tells him to show his mana. Turan just takes the spell head on. The protagonist's power turns bluish. Then he reflects the woman's energy. The maids are defended by the guard, but the mana exchange weakens. Turan takes a deep breath afterward. Azella is surprised by that. Her hands tremble as she laughs. She calls him Sir and asks if he wants to marry her. Turan is speechless, wondering what she means. Azella asks why he's reacting that way since she thought he'd be surprised. Besides, the spot next to her is free now, so he should think about it. And so the girl leaves. Turan is left alone. He looks at his hands, seeing that they were also trembling. He thinks that at the very least, she was a mage on his level, and wonders if she was an ordinary human. Finally, at the Valius house, the protagonist meets with the head of the house. The man welcomes the young noble, and introduces himself as Rug Valius, the Lord of Aurum. Turan introduces himself as well, and Rug asks if he wants to use their library. He warns Turan beforehand that many people come after hearing strange rumors. He clarifies there's no ancient magic or tricks to increase one's power. Turan says that's fine, as he's not interested. Rug replies that if he wanted something, there's nothing he couldn't give, as they have no secrets anyway. It was getting late, so he told him to rest and they would continue tomorrow. Turan replied that he wouldn't forget the master's kindness. The next day near the tower, Kenya confirms the noble lord's identity and welcomes him to the Celestial Library. The doors open, and Turan is surprised. Looking at the endless spiral staircases, he says, "So this is a library." A woman says it's the first time she's seen the Lord. She was the librarian there. According to the family master's orders, she will explain the rules for using this place, and they were simple. Turan thinks this child was the librarian. She continues that the first rule was compensation for damages, and the second was that taking books was forbidden. During his use of the library, she would continue to supervise. Turan says all right, but if he's going to read, he wants her to stay away because it was strange. He reasons that if she is the librarian, she must have read the books there. The woman says yes, and if he needs anything, it was her job to look for it. She asks what he wanted, a romance or a comedy, adding that Master Turan is young, so maybe he wants to see adult books. Turan says he wants to acquire basic knowledge about the world. The librarian grabs a dozen books, saying that many of them are hundreds of years old and won't be suitable for the general knowledge he's looking for, and this section might help a little. Turan picks up one of the books. So that's what that word meant, he thought. He then turns a page. Then he starts to get engrossed, thinking this was incredible. Turan repeated the same routine every day, reading in the library. Now he began to understand the world's geography, the races, the etiquette of mages, how items were processed, and even monsters and relics of the ancient empire. As he stacked this knowledge, his world became clear and vivid. Rug remarks that he's been making good use of the library. Turan confirms, and the man says that even though he treats him as a noble, letting him use the library was an act of kindness, and he would like that kindness to be repaid. A beast recently appeared north of Aurum, attacking travelers. 4 knights sent to subdue it were devoured and never returned. He thinks a noble will have to intervene, but they can only mobilize 2 at the moment. If he joins, they'll have 3, which will be safer. Turan understands, thinking that protecting people is a mage's duty, but it was a bit strange. Usually mages don't get involved in this sort of thing. Rug says that because the Northern Road is Aurum's only trade route, it's been blocked for 10 days, and they need to drive the beast out quickly. Turan thinks it's been 10 days already. He should go, get it over with, and then come back to use the library again. Outside, some soldiers are walking. The 3 mages walk ahead of them. Azella stretches, saying her father is really something else. She never thought he'd involve a guest in a magic beast hunt. She wonders if they aren't trustworthy enough. It's not a problem that he's a guest, but her father is a bit of a handful. Her brother says she's exaggerating, and Azella tells him not to worry about it. The 2 continue to bicker. The young man introduces himself as Marvin, saying it's his first time doing something like this, but Turan's focus is on the woman. Azella kicks a stone in front of her, saying she wants to get this over with and go back to rest. Marvin asks if he's interested in his sister, and Turan denies it. The mage then says that's good. Azella shouts for them to stop several times. Two knights are examining a destroyed wagon. One wonders if this was its doing, and the other says yes. The debris is scattered across the northbound road, and it looks like they were attacked on their way down. Turan analyzes the situation. He notices a handprint. He tells them it was a monkey. Azella questions this, and Turan points to the shape of the hand. It looks like it attacked the merchants and then entered the forest. He thinks they should track its trail. Azella says she can barely use the magic she was born with, and asks if Marvin can. He says, not really. Turan announces he'll take a look. Azella asks if he's even part of their group. The protagonist explains that he's used to tracking. Closing his eyes, he uses his exploration magic. Something draws his consciousness. A scent begins to guide him through the forest. Turan points, saying it's that way. The monkey had stopped at a stream. It seems it took a bath. Azella wonders if a beast would wash itself to cover its tracks. Turan says it probably just washed itself because it felt like it. But he smells an even stronger scent, warning that it's behind them. An immense gorilla appears behind the knights. It then grabs some rocks. A bearded man shouts for them to be careful, while other knights are hit by stone fragments. Turan jumps to the side. Then he looks down, puzzled. A knight is lifeless. Azella had used them as a shield. She then throws the two bodies back. Turan thinks that his mother's words weren't wrong. Azella shouts for them to attack. The knights charge toward the gorilla. Azella shouts to chase the fleeing monster, saying it's too fast. Turan quickly readies his slingshot. The woman keeps ordering everyone to go after it. Suddenly, a stone flies past her side, startling the girl with its sonic speed. The stone pierces the gorilla. Azella and Marvin turn around. Turan continues to spin his slingshot, a smile spreading across his face. The gorilla falls shortly after. Azella prepares her magic, telling it to die. A dragon of fire begins to manifest on her arm. It lunges toward the gorilla, causing a huge explosion in the area. Turan thinks, so this is the power of the pyromancer bloodline of House Valies. The knights sigh, saying it's over. Azella comments that she felt a chill for a moment when that stone flew by. Marvin asks if she was scared, and Azella tells him to shut up, saying he was the one screaming like a little girl. The knights get up and start tending to each other. Turan notes the chaos but thinks it's a relief no one lost their life. Even though there was a surprise attack from the magic beast, it was a battle where they could have avoided serious injuries. Turan looks to the side. He thinks that considering the body gets stronger according to one's magic power, they should be several times more resilient than the knights. Yet they used them. Marvin asks why he's looking at him like that. Turan replies it's nothing. Azella says that, more importantly, they should hurry and absorb the mana. The three of them point their hands at the gorilla. Turan begins to absorb it. He thinks that, just as he read in the books, even if several people absorb it at the same time, the level of strengthening doesn't seem to decrease. Azella says she can't absorb anymore and curses her growth limit. Marvin agrees, but now she understands why her father sent the guest along. He has a level of magical mastery and mana that rivals her own. To think he's a noble who hasn't even reached his growth limit yet. On the way back to the castle, Marvin says that if it weren't for Turan, they never would have caught the gorilla. From the tracking skill to the final blow that took it down, it was all him. Turan says he's exaggerating. On the contrary, it was a shame he noticed too late and let it attack. He didn't know it had detection skills. It seems awakened abilities vary according to the physical characteristics of magic beasts. The monkey they defeated had large hands and eyes, but it was different from its original form. It probably had the ability to throw things with great force. Marvin is impressed, and comments he never imagined Turan would figure it out so quickly. Turan says he saw a demon bestiary in the library. The noble says that old-fashioned place never gets any visitors. Azella agrees, saying she went there once, but it only had difficult books. Turan says that if she gets a chance, she should ask the librarian if there are any easier books. But the girl asks, "Librarian?" The protagonist explains it's the person who manages the place. Azella wonders if there was someone like that there. Back at the library later, the librarian runs up and welcomes the protagonist. Turan thinks he was careless. No knight or commoner would dare call a noble by name. In this city, the proper address for them is your nobility. Besides, for a librarian to be in this state, he wants to know how she knows his name. The librarian's mouth hangs open in surprise, but then a smile spreads across her face. She asks if he only just noticed. Turan confirms, and she explains that she saw his license and found out his name. Within the confines of this library, nothing escapes her sight. Turan asks what he should call her. The librarian replies that she doesn't have a name, so he can call her whatever he wants. She suggests something cute like my love. Turan just just calls her librarian. The woman says it's strange for him to suddenly be so polite after spending days ordering her around. Turan tells her not to get too close as it's a bit uncomfortable. He asks if she's a mage from the old empire, but the librarian denies it. She's not even human. She's something like a spirit. When a soul inhabits something living, it's a living spirit. When it inhabits something lifeless, it's a spirit of the non-living. But when it inhabits something ambiguous, it's just a spirit. This appearance is to facilitate communication according to the user's taste, but Turan's taste is a bit strange. The protagonist tells her not to lie, and she says it's like a reflection in water. Turan begins to analyze her up close, placing a hand on her chest. The librarian tells him to stop, that it's weird. Turan apologizes. She says he has no idea how irritating it is not being able to use force directly against trespassers. If she could, she would punish all those who handle the library's books carelessly. Turan says it seems the head of the Valius family doesn't know about her existence, or rather, maybe no one who has used the library knew. The librarian explains it's because no one had the qualifications to perceive her. Her creator made it so that only those of a certain type who reach a certain level can recognize her. In other words, only Turan can see her. He asks what she means by type, and she explains it's the bloodline that mages always talk about. Turan asks her to tell him about his bloodline, but she says he should ask his parents. He tells her he's an orphan. She asks if he wants her to check, saying he just needs to agree to let her examine his body. Turan is startled by this. She starts laughing, and he wonders if she's serious, but the ghost touches his chest. She then comments that they're connected now, and Turan tells her not to say such strange things. She explains that there are a few minor lines, but the main one is that of a tracker and hunter, which is characteristic of the Zahar family. But she's surprised, saying there's another one. It was mixed, and he asks what she means. The librarian explains that he's the result of two people with different bloodlines, and she doesn't know the other one because it's still sealed. It wasn't uncommon for a sealed bloodline to emerge when two combine, and if he gets stronger, it will open up naturally. Turan thinks of his mother. He notes that she was too educated and cultured to be a simple commoner. Perhaps she was a descendant of some noble, even if the bloodline had been greatly diluted. He thanks her, saying he understands. She replies that if he's so grateful, he should stay for another month. After discovering the true identity of the library spirit, Turan didn't just read alone anymore. He started asking her all sorts of questions. The librarian even knew the contents of books that had been looted and had disappeared from the library. Learning the principles of nature directly from her was practically a treasure. He discovered that many diseases arise from these microorganisms, and that the decomposition of living things occurs because these germs feed on them. He also learned about light refraction, the heat of friction, and the principles of how wounds are formed. Turan says he'll start by testing decomposition. He then touches an apple. It begins to rot easily. He remarks that it's impressive. It's not that common magic couldn't do this, but understanding the principle allows him to use less mana. Just by changing how he perceived the world, his magical ability improved. He speculates that some powerful families might monopolize this kind of knowledge. If all mages knew this, they would lose their advantage. The librarian says she understands why the level of knowledge has been declining over time, and if what he says is true, it makes sense. The next day, Turan tells her it's time for him to leave. The owner of this place has already started giving very clear signals. The librarian begs him to take her with him, but she just passes right through him. Turan asks if she can leave, and she says no, adding that she would take good care of him if he stayed, but she turns away, saying she doesn't care. She adds that on this continent, there are many legacies of the gods, and he should check them out from time to time because there might be a spirit who knows more than she does. Turan turns and says he'll come back to visit her. The librarian tells him to come if he wants, and if he doesn't, whatever. He tells her that there are still many books he wants to read. As the day passed, Turan leaves the city, thinking that according to the map of the continent he got from the library, the Enro Desert, the base of the Zahar family, is east of Orem. He will go to the great house of Zahar to find clues about his parents, but he was in no hurry. If the clues were going to disappear, they would have done so in the past 18 years, and if any remain, they won't vanish just because he arrives a little later. He hears something in the forest. A horse neighs in anger. Turan peeks from behind a bush. He notices a horse breaking free from a rider. He thinks it's a saddle. The horse wasn't attacked by a monster, but rather, it was being protected. Another man curses the demon and questions how a pet beast can be so strong. Turan then looks over. He sees they are dark elves trying to create an opening. They prepare their magic. Two slimes form on the ground. Turan thinks it's the dark elves' necromancy he read about in a book. He wonders if he should help, considering the fallen man might have attacked the elves first. But he's surprised by what happens next. The elves feed on the man. The female elf asks whose hand this is and requests a piece, but her colleague tells her to take the other one. Turan thinks, so they're that kind of people. He uses his concealment magic. magic. The elves continue to feed on the body until one of their heads explodes. The dark elf turns, wondering what happened. Then blood hits the ground. She gets scared. She orders her beasts to gather in front of her. Turan then throws a stone. It hits the goat horn on her shoulder. The elf wonders who the bastard is, demanding that he show himself. Her summoned monster destroys a tree in its path. She notices its concealment magic. She says they'll see if he can still hide. She summons a monster fox to sniff him out. Turan appears with a smile on his face. The dark elf turns to him. She shouts that he's a damned demon. She then orders her beasts to take his life. Turan claps his hands together. He opens them and shouts, "Fire arrow!" It causes a combustion in front of him. The monsters continue to advance toward him. Turan dodges one of the monsters. He falls to the ground, thinking that it was fast, and it was a good thing he managed to defeat one of them first. But he is surprised a moment later. The monster fox had managed to bite his leg. Turan kicks the creature away. He turns to face forward again. The bull charges at him once more. It throws him against a tree. Turan spits blood. He falls to the ground, coughing. The elf says it serves him right for daring to take her Kel's life, but the horse then kicks her in the face. It stomps on the dark elf as she screams for help. The monsters turn toward her. They advance, biting and attacking her in various ways. The elf asks how he dares to humiliate her like this, vowing to take his life. But another attack comes. A stone bursts her eyes. Turan had already gotten up and shoots with his slingshot. The monsters begin to disappear. Turan takes a deep breath. Still suffering from blood loss, he falls to his knees. He thinks he's really going to die, but the horse approaches him. Turan lifts his head in surprise. He leans on it and thanks it. Later, the blonde man opens his eyes. A campfire was crackling in front of him. The man screams in fear. He finds himself face to face with Turan, who is sitting down. Turan says, "You're awake." The man asks who he is, and Turan explains that he was being attacked by dark elves and that he saved him. His horse approaches from behind. The blonde man pets her and calls her Tilly. Turan remarks that she's very smart, able to understand she needs to protect her owner and move to a safer location. The blonde man thanks him for saving his life, introducing himself as Aziz from the Burke family. Turan does the same. He asks if there was any reason for the conflict with the dark elves, but the blonde man says no, explaining that he was on a pilgrimage with his servants when they were suddenly attacked without provocation. He had heard that other races were violent, but he never imagined it would be to this extent. He then starts crying as he laments. He apologizes, saying he lost many people who were precious to him. Turan asks if they were his family, and Aziz says they were the knights and servants who had been with him on the pilgrimage since he was a child. Turan thinks he's a good person. He then asks how many elves attacked them, as he killed 2. Aziz says that was probably all of them. Turan uses scouting magic. He scans the entire forest. He thinks that there really are no more dark elves around. Aziz asks if he has any urgent business, and Turan says he's also on a pilgrimage. The blonde man says that for someone so strong, he's still on a pilgrimage, and asks if he happens to be the son of some great family. Turan says he's not that strong. He took one by surprise, then struggled with the other and barely won. He releases his mana. Aziz does the same. They both sense each other's level. Aziz thinks he isn't very strong. If he hadn't absorbed the dark elves' mana, he'd be even weaker. He's definitely not at the level to face 2 necromancers. Maybe he just has great combat instincts. He wonders why someone like him is all alone. He says that if he has nowhere to go, he'd like to invite him to join the Burke family. He promises to repay him for saving his life and to see his family to safety. The Burke family are vassals of the great house of Arabian in the north. They come from a long line of enchantment artisans. They'll craft a magical artifact that's just right for him. Later, the 2 of them prepare graves for all the subordinates. Aziz says they're finally done. In his heart, he wishes he could send them all back to their homeland, but he thanks him for not laughing. A noble crying over the sacrifice of his men must be a pathetic sight. That's what my father taught me since I was a child. Those who lose their lives in a just battle will reside in the celestial palace with the gods. To mourn them is a weakness, and a true noble must move on. But if strength means not suffering when you lose your family, then I guess I'll always be weak. Turan says that's not weakness, but kindness. Aziz says that since they're traveling together, he wants to speak casually, as there doesn't seem to be much difference between them. He says he's counting on him from now on. Turan looks at his hand and thinks, he was my friend. Then he says he's counting on him too. Later, Aziz asks if they should rest for a bit. Turan asks what that box is. He explains it's a cooler, and that he packed a lot of food in it back in the last town. Turan asks if it's always cold. Aziz says yes, and that any food will last for about a week without a problem. This one's a magic item that dispenses water when you press a button. The other creates a shelter if you gather some wood, and it also sounds an alarm if anyone approaches. And this thing he's wearing is an item with a cleaning function. Turan thinks that magic items shouldn't be so common, This is impressive. He then says this outfit alone would be payment enough for his life. But Aziz says things like this aren't worth much and promises to reward him with something better. And if the elders don't allow it, I'll make one myself. Besides, nothing beats what he can do. He can't even remember how many types of magic he's seen him use as they travel together, from manipulating animals to summoning lightning. He wonders if he spent his entire life just practicing magic, or if it's some kind of bloodline ability that lets him learn any magic. Turan thinks it just happens, but he reminds him they agreed he wouldn't investigate which family he's from. Aziz says it was a joke, and there's no way such an absurd bloodline could exist. He asks how old he is, since he doesn't even look 30. Turan says his 19th birthday is in about a month. Aziz says he's turning 43 this year. A difference of only 24 years isn't that important. He should have realized when he said he defeated 2 necromancers with that much magical power. Who would have thought there were 2 geniuses in the world? He's not at your level, but his bloodline is what it is. Still, I know another genius your age, my cousin. Turan asks if he could ask this person to make a magic item, but Aziz says no. She's not from the direct lineage, but from the main family. The protagonist is surprised and asks, by any chance, is it the Princess of Arabian? Aziz confirms, saying she might become the head of the great lineage in the future. They both continue walking toward the family estate. Aziz explains that unlike a common family of mages, the leader of a great lineage can't easily pass the position to their own biological child. In a great lineage, there are dozens of relatives of the same generation. Among them, someone stronger than the patriarch's son always emerges. And yet, among the patriarch's own children, she was born, Mesa, who possesses the greatest talent of all. Just 10 years after her magical awakening, she mastered the lineage's magic and all types of combat magic. As a result, she has received full support. Turan says that with that much power, he wonders if her family gave her any special support for the future. Aziz says yes, she even inherited her great-uncle's magical power when he died. Of course, he received a portion too. The protagonist thinks that there's definitely a reason why the great lineages are at the top. Then the blonde man announces that they're arriving. The protagonist is surprised right after. The grass in front of him begins to stir in the wind. Aziz explains that this is the Dakine Plain, the central territory of Arabian. In the territory of the Burke family, Zabalin. The mother greets her son and asks what happened. Aziz immediately hugs his mother. Turan looks on and thinks, he's 43 years old. The father tells him to think of his dignity. At the very least, he should call her Madam. Turan thinks, I don't think that's the problem here. Aziz introduces Turan as a new friend he made in the south, the benefactor who risked his life to save him. The mother says that paths shouldn't be dangerous and asks what happened. Aziz tells her they were attacked by dark elves. His mother yells that those filthy creatures dared to target her son, and that she'll personally lead an army to wipe them out. But a subordinate asks her to calm down as people are watching. She asks which family her benefactor belongs to. Turan says it's hard to say. To be honest, I can't really say. I was born to a commoner mother, and I don't know who my father is. Aziz says he hadn't told him that. Turan replies that it's not a story to be proud of. The mother says, so you don't belong to any known family. Since you saved the heir of this house, we will pay you the reward you deserve. It would be difficult to offer you a room, but we'll make arrangements for you to stay in the finest guest house. Aziz asks what she's saying, as he wants to host his own benefactor. She says that times have changed, and they have an illustrious person in their home. As much as he is a benefactor, it's difficult to let in a guest whose identity is unknown. But Mesa interrupts, if it's because of me, you don't have to do that. I doubt someone who saved Aziz would suddenly try to take my life. She appears right after, walking calmly towards them. Aziz asks what she's suddenly doing here. Turan thinks, that woman is the Princess of Arabian. She looks more like a corpse than a princess. Mesa says it hasn't been long since she was almost assassinated by those worms from Zahar, so she came here to hide. Aziz questions this, since they had such a strict defense system. Mesa says there's probably a traitor inside. It's not like there are only 1 or 2 people in the family who dislike her. But I'm tired. I'll retire for now. Good night, everyone. The mother says they will then prepare the second best guest room for Mr. Turan, later in the same castle. Turan opens his eyes at dawn, still lying in bed, looking at the ceiling. One of the magic lanterns illuminates the hallway. Turan walks through it, now dressed. Aziz calls his friend's name. You're an early riser too. What are you doing alone in the hallway? Turan says the lamp caught his eye. Aziz mentions he used to make them all the time when he practiced enchantment magic as a child. We have several in storage, but the protagonist says he doesn't need that many. Just then, A golden bolt of lightning cracks outside the window. The protagonist immediately turns to look. Aziz explains that Mesa seems to be training her magic. He says she's always dedicated. Turan asks if that's the magic of the Arabian lineage. Aziz tells him it's the lineage of the storm. He never hated his own blood, but this made him a bit envious. It was like looking at a real god. Turan thought about it. He was curious how strong the next heir of the Arabian family was. Aziz asked if he wanted to go see her. Turan admitted he was curious, but didn't think it was a good idea for a stranger to approach. The young man said it wasn't like he was an assassin and vouched for him. To be honest, he was also curious about who was better between the two. Turan replied that this must be the real reason he wanted to take him. Aziz mentioned he had trained with his cousin a few years ago, and it had stuck with him. He wanted to see her get frustrated just once. So, once outside, he called out to his cousin. She recognized her cousin and asked who was with him. The protagonist introduced himself. Her name was Mesa, she said, and asked what brought them here so suddenly. Aziz said it was nothing special. They saw she was training and wanted to join in. Mesa said she remembered. That one time, he spent a whole week trying a new spell, and she got it in 2 tries. Aziz left crying. Turan laughed at that and apologized. Aziz then said that Turan was the most talented person he had ever seen, almost a monster. He suggested the two of them should fight. Mesa repeated his words. She stared coldly at the protagonist before her. She began to release her mana. Turan looked up at the sky. Lightning was striking across it. Mesa continued to unleash her magic. It was an oppressive force, meant to gauge the protagonist's power. Turan started to feel the pressure. For the first time, he felt fear. Then, the sky calmed down. Mesa and the protagonist remained facing each other. Turan broke into a cold sweat after that experience. He was breathing heavily. Mesa apologized for what she was about to say, but it didn't seem like he was on her level to fight. Aziz interrupted, saying that in terms of magical power, it was clear he was no match. What was truly incredible was his ability to learn magic. Turan was a magical genius unlike any he had ever seen, and even she couldn't reach his level. Mesa said that since he was praising him so much, she'd see what he was capable of. Turan suggested they each demonstrate a spell the other didn't know. Whoever could replicate it faster would win. Aziz said it was a good method, and asked what she thought. Mesa agreed. She'd heard he didn't know his own lineage's magic, so it would be unfair to use her innate magic. She would leave it out. She slammed her hand on the ground, saying she would go first. Aziz looked over, surprised. A small vine sprouted from the ground. It moved and pierced through everything, heading towards Aziz. The vines quickly entangled him, lifting him up. Mesa explained that it was plant creation and manipulation magic. Aziz asked to be let down, saying he was getting dizzy, but Mesa just said it was fun. Turan looked up and touched the ground, crouching down. He thought that fire magic was just manifesting the phenomenon of burning, and water magic was simply extracting invisible moisture from the air. He then commanded it to grow, thinking that vines were the same. They were just seeds planted in the soil. In other words, it was just growth that began to move. Mesa was surprised by this. Aziz was too, his mouth hanging open. The girl said that by telling it to grow, it seemed he had discovered the true nature of the magic. She asked if he had seen it before, but Turan said no. Mesa admitted that Aziz was right for once, which was rare. Now it was his turn to propose the challenge. She would see what he could do. Turan thought that using Zahar's lineage magic would be asking to lose his own life, but then he noticed something. He pointed his hand towards a bush. Something started to rustle in there. A rat scurried out. Mesa asked if it was just animal control, and if that was all, but the protagonist said no. The rat was just the ingredient. His eyes began to glow with mana. The rat started to twitch from side to side. Then, its body rotted away. Mesa was shocked by this magic. Turan said he was ready. She said it was now her turn. She moved her finger. A rat walked towards her. Mesa picked it up. She channeled her mana into the rat, but her magic had no effect. She wondered how he did it. This wasn't a common spell. Aziz asked why he'd used such a disgusting spell. Turan said it was just the first thing that came to mind. He reflected on his suspicions. He wondered if even a family like the Arabians didn't know this magic. Aziz noted that it didn't seem to be working, and suggested giving the victory to Turan. Mesa told him to shut up. She believed she could do it. When using magic, the principle of causality was an extremely complex element. If the desired phenomenon was natural, and the user clearly understood its cause, the amount of mana required was appropriate. Among these factors, the ability to perceive the cause of a phenomenon was crucial, directly influencing the spell's success rate, and one way to compensate for a lack of understanding of causality was to invest a large amount of mana, overcoming inefficiency with sheer volume. So, Mesa kept repeating mentally, "Rot," while still alive. The rat began to follow the mental command. It rotted in the mage's hand. Aziz said that it worked. Mesa celebrated that it had worked. She'd done it, but her eyes lost their focus. Then she collapsed to the ground. Aziz asked what happened happened and told her to open her eyes. Turan wondered why. Did she use too much mana? People don't usually faint just from mana exhaustion. At most, she should just be exhausted, having lost the strength to support her own body. But then he noticed something. He looked at her hand and understood. He picked her up, asking if there were any mages with a healing lineage nearby. Aziz said no, so Turan told him to bring water, salt, and the adults. He thought about how light she was, almost confusing her for a lamb instead of a person. With the amount of mana she'd used, she shouldn't have even been able to stand. Later, in her room, Mesa regained consciousness. Her mother asked if she was alright, if she was awake. Mesa asked why she was there. Her mother explained that Aziz had told them she suddenly fainted while practicing magic with their guest. The girl looked down, dejected. Her aunt asked if that man had done something to her, saying they would observe him from a distance for now, but Mesa denied it. It wasn't his fault, just a small mistake on her part. She told them all to leave because her head was throbbing. Her mother said she had made some soup for her. She knew she didn't eat because of her magic, but she needed to think about her health and try to have a little. She then sighed deeply. Mesa thanked her aunt for her help. She looked down, a little sad. She turned to the soup on the table. She picked it up. The girl tried to take a spoonful. As she put the food in her mouth, a wave of nausea washed over her. Ghosts in her mind begged Mesa to save them, crying that it hurt so much. Startled, the girl dropped the bowl on the floor. Mesa clutched her head tightly. Then she covered her ears and shut her eyes. Later, in another part of the house, in the basement of the Beck family, the temple of the lame goddess, a man said that the doors and walls were solid, without any gaps, like muscles trained for hundreds of years. He should give up any thought of trying to break through and escape. Turan said he understood and wasn't even thinking about it. Haram commented that it was very solid, and the protagonist agreed. The guard approached and said it was extremely... The protagonist wondered if he was bragging, but then he looked to the side. Haram moved his sword, swinging it from top to bottom. Turan asks what he's doing, and Haram says he's training. He then swings his sword downward. He follows with a thrust and makes a diagonal slash. Turan thinks that there are no wasted movements, as each one is the minimal setup for the next attack. That's the efficiency of a trained body. Then he notices Haram looking at him. He asks if he was interrupting, but Haram denies it, asking what he saw in his training just now. Turan says he thought it was incredible. Haram says he gets it. Most nobles consider martial arts insignificant because it's easier to attack from a distance, but in truth, their bodies are weak. Turan says that unless it's a combat bloodline like Hercules, focusing on magical power ends up being more efficient. But when facing trials, situations arise that you have to face, even if you want to avoid them. Haram hands him the sword, telling him to hold it. Turan asks if he wasn't arrested for being a suspect, and if it's okay to give him a weapon. But the man says it's just a piece of iron, and what makes it a sword is the body of the one holding it. Haram asks what Turan can do with this sword. Then he tells him to watch this. Turan puts mana into his sword stance. Haram shouts that's not it. He shouldn't use mana. He tells him to put more weight on his front leg and press down as if the earth were supporting his feet, correcting the rest of his posture. Turan agrees with all the knight's adjustments. Haram tells him to repeat it 10 times without stopping to breathe, breathing life into his muscles. It's a good vessel. If he can, he should find time to push this body to its limit. Mana is nothing but a trick, and mages think their physical abilities are guaranteed, but that's just the bare minimum their body possesses. A properly trained body can tear through the battlefield without the aid of mana, and Turan says he will burn this into his mind, but then he looks to the side. The family's matriarch approaches him, saying she was very rude and did something one shouldn't do to a benefactor. Turan says he is the one who should apologize, and as a guest, his conduct was inappropriate. The woman replies that Mesa would like to apologize to him and asks if he can make time. Later in her room, she says it was an inconvenience, as she heard he was held in the temple, and apologizes for causing unnecessary trouble. Turan says it was necessary, and, more importantly, he's glad she's okay. Mesa says that regarding yesterday's magic that makes animals rot, she wants to know if it was from a bloodline, as the mana consumption was absurd. Turan denies it, saying that if she understands the principle, she can use it too. Mesa says that if he doesn't teach her the method, there's no proof it isn't bloodline magic, and the protagonist says it doesn't matter to him that he didn't win. She's surprised, and asks where that leaves her if it just ends like this. So they'll do this. He'll tell her the secret of this magic, and she'll teach him Arabian's secret technique. Turan agrees. And so the two begin to talk about magic. Mesa says, so it was biological enhancement magic, and he used invisible microorganisms. And just as she thought, she was using it without knowing, which is why her efficiency was poor. She lost because even though she managed it, it was through brute force. Turan says he considered that part of the bet, but Mesa replies it doesn't count, because when evaluating magical skill, an absurd amount of mana isn't included. She wonders if they could consider it a draw for Aziz's sake, since she doesn't want to see him getting cocky, and Turan agrees, but she needs to pay the price. Mesa shows him a brush and says this looks good. She then brushes her hair. She says that, as you can see, when objects rub against each other like this, a phenomenon occurs where they attract each other. Turan says that's static electricity. She's surprised he already knows. Then she says it's one of the deepest and most secret pieces of knowledge, and that she'll have to think of a better way to pay him. Until she can think of a proper compensation, she suggests they continue training together, and that this is just to pay off the debt. Turan says that sounds good, and they agree to meet every day at dusk in the garden. Later, at a banquet, a patriarch says it's not much, but he should eat plenty. Aziz asks why it's so extravagant, since there's more food than on his own birthday, and anyone would think the head of the family was visiting. Turan thinks this is no ordinary meal. The matriarch says, continuing their discussion, that she heard her son promised a powerful magical artifact as payment for his life. Turan confirms, and she asks if he has anything specific in mind. The protagonist says he wants something that helps with defense, as it's easy to hurt others but hard to protect oneself. The woman says it's something they've made a lot of, but they don't have anything ready at the moment. Another man offers to make it, as he coincidentally just finished a request from the main house and has some free time. The matriarch asks how he'll make it, and the young man says that to deal with surprise attacks, the ideal thing is something that's always with him. A ring, earring, or necklace with the function to inject mana, immediately releasing the Guardian Bloodline's defense with a 1-month deadline. The father says it's shameful to brag, but Mello has skills that are not inferior to his own as the head, which in practice means it would be an artifact of his level. Turan thanks them, but asks if it isn't a bit too much. She says that if it's too much, it means her son's life is worth little, and that's not the case. So, for this month, he will stay as a guest of their family, and he shouldn't feel uncomfortable. Aziz says his mother has taken an interest in him. In fact, he told her more about him before bed last night, from his magical talent to the fact that he never neglects training. The intention was just to stop her from looking down on him for being a wandering noble without support. Turan says that hearing all this, it sounds like she wants to recruit him into the family. Aziz agrees, because they shower people with benefits and then apply pressure to hook them by introducing a beautiful young woman. In fact, there are several adults in the family like that, but he shouldn't worry, as the artifact is just to win his favor. They won't force him to marry just because he accepted, and his mother isn't that shameless. He asks if he has anything to do right now, and Turan says he arranged to train with Mesa later. Aziz says they still have plenty of time then, and they're going to walk around town. Even though Zabalin isn't the capital, there's a lot to enjoy. He asks if he was planning on just staying locked in his room training magic all day, and Turan agrees. Aziz says life is too short not to enjoy it and drags him downtown. Later, in a casino, he tries to encourage the protagonist, explaining how it works to him. On another side of town, he shows him more. Turan then looks to the side, seeing a poster on the wall. Then he notices something different. That wanted man was Kiorn. He wonders if it could really be him. Elsewhere, a sword duel is taking place. A story says that around an ancient era, when the Arabian warriors set out into the desert, there was a knight named Kiorn. With divine help, he defeats the enemy after a difficult fight. Everyone applauds right after. Aziz asks if it was worth watching, and Turan confirms it was good, thinking that Kiorn was very humble to call himself a common knight, and if he ever meets him again, he'll ask if that story was really true. Later, the next day, the protagonist wakes up feeling a bit off, noticing Haram staring at him from his side. He then asks if he rested his body, and the protagonist confirms but wants to know what brings him here. He says that his vessel looked promising, so he must come and train because the body doesn't get strong by resting, but by being forged. Turan agrees and thinks it's more rewarding to gain something than to just have fun. Aziz enters his room, saying he heard there's an amazing play, but he notices Haram there in front of him. The man says he's going to train, and that he should forge his weak body too, but Aziz refuses, saying he just got back from being out, and he runs off, saying he's still tired. Turan wonders why he's acting like that, but later he realizes this was the reason. Haram asks if he can't hear his body screaming. He says they have to do it one more time, that he can't give up over such a small amount of pain, and to finish up, this will be the last time. That's enough training for today. Turan then lies down on the ground. Haram asks if he's tired. Still, he's a mage, and should consider himself lucky to only have to do this once. A normal body, even after being forged, weakens over time. It needs to be constantly tested to maintain its strength. But mages, thanks to mana, keep their bodies in an ideal state. Once you turn it into steel, it doesn't weaken. He says that's enough rest for now. The protagonist gets up, saying no. But the man says he knows, because the body doesn't lie. And now, he's going to teach him weapon techniques and hand-to-hand combat. The Burke family's routine was extremely intense. Turan breathes heavily from the training. Haram explains this is a special space where the body becomes several times heavier than normal. If he hesitates, he'll be crushed. So in the morning, he trains with Haram. At dusk, he returns to the mansion and repeats his magic training with Mesa. And just like that, before he knew it, 3 weeks had passed. His blue lightning bolt hits a target on the wall. Turan thinks that he missed again. Mesa says that for someone like him, he's having unusual difficulty. The protagonist confirms it's because he's not from Arabian. The girl says in that case, it's hard to help, as she's never thought of aiming that way, until a voice calls out for the young lady. A knight says, "There you are," and asks who this man is. Mesa tells him it's none of his business and asks what happened. She had told the main house not to approach while she was recovering. The knight reports that the head of the family has summoned her. Mesa demands to know what's going on, warning that if it's not important, he'll regret it. They said the Dark Elves have started a major offensive in the south. 3 cities have already fallen, so they're launching an expedition. Those elves were planning something, Turan thinks, so they've shown up. Mesa says she understands and to let them know she'll be back soon. She then comments that she thinks she has to go, but speaking of which, he should pay the price for that disgusting decomposition magic. She then claps her hands, thinking of something. She asks if Turan knows that electricity also flows through the human body. The protagonist questions this. She says there's no way he would know, as it's her family's secret. She then suggests they consider the debt paid if she teaches him this properly, as it will be a great help. Because when someone sees or feels something, that part of the body sends a small electrical signal to the brain, no matter which part it is. Turan then closes his eyes, thinking of a minuscule electrical current. This electricity flows throughout his entire body, and if he accelerates the electrical signals transmitted along this path, his body begins to concentrate even more, and his eyes become electrified. His perception of the world is completely altered. Mesa's speech then becomes slow. She asks, "How's this?" But with her voice at less than 1% of its original speed, Turan starts laughing and wonders, "What is this?" But a jolt hits his brain. He clutches his head as his perception returns to normal. Mesa says it looks like he got it, and that it happened because he poured in mana recklessly. It'll probably be hard to adapt now because of the headache, but once he gets used to it, he'll be able to maintain it for a long time. Turan says it was valuable. Mesa jumps away right after, saying it's just an investment. Since he seems to have some talent, if he ends up learning something better in the future, she'll collect on the debt. And with that, she flies away. Turan watches in awe. The next day, a bird flies over the city. A crowd of knights gathers in the center of Morgan, the heart of the Dakine Plain. The civilians shout, "Glory to Arabian!" Aziz comments that it's just a departure ceremony, but it looks like a victory parade. He's surprised a moment later, waving at Mesa, who is on horseback. His father tells him to maintain the posture of a nobleman until they announce that the head of the family is entering. The man begins to walk. Turan thinks that person is the current head of House Arabian, Badal Arabian, who has several scars on his face. Turan says he doesn't look well, as he's pale, and asks about his health. Aziz replies that he heard rumors he was gravely injured fighting the head of House Sahar, but since it was a long time ago, maybe it's just old age. The head of the family extends his hand to the sky. All the civilians are then surprised as they look up at the sky. An immense black cloud takes over the area. Lightning starts to flash across the sky, causing a thunderstorm. Everyone then shouts, "Long live Arabian," Turan thinks, so this is their power. Even with his body in poor condition, he easily covers the land. This was the pinnacle of magic achieved by a human. One day he would also reach this point. Later, in another place, Mello hands him the bracelet. She says that just wearing it a little increases physical resistance, and if he injects mana, that level increases even more. At its limit, it reaches the level of nobles from a guardian bloodline. The mana consumption is high, so it's best not to use it for too long. Turan says this is an incredible treasure, and Mello says an item like this probably wouldn't be common even among the great families. The matriarch calls for Turan, asking if he has any interest in formally joining her family. Turan says it's an offer he's grateful for, but he thinks it would be difficult. The mother says she's heard the stories, that he's someone with much to do and would have a hard time settling in one place. Turan says he will never forget their hospitality and that the Burke family will be his friends forever. With that, he leaves the house. He is surprised a moment later as he comes face to face with Haram and Aziz. Haram tosses a dagger to him, explaining that it's a magical device without many functions, but it's sturdy and the blade is very sharp. The protagonist thanks him for it and calls him master. A smile spreads across Haram's face. He then runs off, embarrassed. Aziz places a cloak on the protagonist. Turan asks what it is, and the nobleman asks if he wasn't envious of his clothes, because it doesn't get dirty and easily repairs itself if torn. And here are a shirt and pants. The protagonist says his friend's name. Aziz says he's a good friend, and not just for saving his life. After spending time together and seeing his way of life, It gave him a lot to think about. He then asks where he plans to go, and the protagonist says he'll head east first. Aziz says that's Carmane and he's been there. He advises him not to take the ship if he can avoid it, because the waves are the worst. Turan thinks that he'll have to pass through those waves to get to Zahar's land, but he can't say that. Aziz says that since he's so stubborn, he won't starve, and tells him to come back safely to pay him back for the cloak. The protagonist walks across a field on the plain. He thinks that he's alone again now. He then gets ready. Thinking he'll run for a bit, he shoots off at maximum speed. The commoners look to the side, completely confused, seeing only the protagonist's trail in his wake. Turan travels across various types of terrain in a short time. Later, as the sky begins to darken, he then stops his run. Looking ahead with some surprise, he looks up at the top of the mountain. A strange smell hits his nose. The protagonist wonders what it is. It smells like a bonfire, but something more disgusting, like a burning animal. He then looks forward, coming face to face with a destroyed village. There were lifeless, burnt bodies all around, tied to some kind of wooden stakes. Turan wonders if they were attacked by bandits, since the dark elves shouldn't have come this far. Then he looks to the side, surprised, seeing one house still standing. He goes inside, but there's nothing there, crouching in front of a hatch. He then grabs both handles, pulling with all his might. The protagonist is completely surprised, seeing a girl trembling in fear. She screams right after. Turan asks her to calm down, saying he's not an enemy and came to help. The girl asks if he's serious. The protagonist asks her to tell him what happened, but she tells him that the mage took everyone's lives, falling to the ground right after. Turan catches her in his arms and thinks that fortunately it's not serious. She must just be exhausted from being trapped in the basement for so long. First, I need to get this child to a safe place. Outside, an ice bow is pointed at him. They shout that they've found him. An army stands before him. The woman orders him to his knees, calling him a wretched murderer. She asks if the whole attack wasn't enough, that now he's even kidnapped a child. Another mage tells him not to move. Turan says it's a misunderstanding, but they shoot fire magic at him, causing an explosion in front of the house. The woman scolds Gil because there's a child there and he says it was an accident, but then she's surprised. A hand emerges from the smoke. The protagonist had stopped his magic with his bare hand. He thinks, I didn't think I'd have to use the artifact right away. Everyone is shocked that there isn't even a burn mark, as he blocked it with just his body, and the woman wonders if it was defense magic or some kind of bloodline ability. Turan states that he wasn't the one who attacked the village and this is a misunderstanding. But if they attack again, he won't just defend himself. The woman remains wary, but she looks at the child in his arms, saying it makes sense, as there's no reason for someone to cause such a tragedy and then stay just to save a child. She introduces herself as Beeson, and the protagonist says his name too. She says that even with all the evidence pointing to the contrary, she wants to know how she can believe him. Turan tells her to ask the girl when she wakes up, as it seems she saw the real culprit. Beeson is surprised by this. She asks if the girl saw the arsonist, and the protagonist is surprised. She asks if the protagonist doesn't know who it was, and Turan says he doesn't. Beeson explains that it's the mad mage who committed this atrocity. For a few months, he's been attacking isolated villages, tying up and burning the residents. Since there are no survivors, not even their gender is known, and all they know is that they call him the arsonist. Later, the girl explains that he wore a red cape, had a beard, and a frightening appearance like a lumberjack. Everyone listens to this description. Beeson looks at Turan in the back, apologizing for being rude out of impatience, saying it was clearly a mistake to point her weapon at him. Turan thinks that even among nobles, there are those who let their sense of duty speak louder. Midan was an honest and good leader. Then he says that what matters is that she was worried about the child's health first. He asks why they came to capture the arsonist. Beeson says that since someone was in a place that had just been burned down, she thought they had caught him, but now they only have a description of the bastard, and they'll catch him soon because they have a tracker with them. Turan asks if they are from the Zahar family, and why they're in a place like this. Beeson says no, she's from the Carmane family of Abicha, and her friends are from vassal families. Asha was a descendant of someone who, in ancient times, mixed their blood with a noble from the Zahar family, manifesting it weakly with no talent for concealing it. More importantly, she has a request for Turan, asking if he can help hunt the arsonist, because they'll give him the full reward for the capture, or she can even yield part of her mana. What she needs is to earn merits. Turan asks if his power level is known, and Beeson says he's a noble level mage. Among the villages he attacked, some were protected by several knights, yet they all lost their lives. Turan thinks about this, and perhaps this is exactly the kind of opponent I need right now, since the weak demonic beasts on the roadside don't increase my strength. So, he accepts her offer. But first, they must leave the child in a safe place. He offers enough money to take care of the child until she grows up, and the man confirms. Turan says he will return in a few years to check. That man gets chills from this threat back in the burnt village. Asha closes her eyes, opening them again with her tracking bloodline ability. Beeson asks what she found, and Asha says they need to search a bit more. So they decide to move through the area. Amidst the tracks of footprints, some trees had peeled bark as well. Asha sniffs the air there. Turan asks how they are tracking him. She explains that she looked for human male footprints, and when they reached the road, she followed the scent of ashes, since if he hasn't changed clothes, there must be residue. Turan thinks she's quite professional. Before, they didn't even know the gender, but Asha says she found it. She rushes forward as Beeson asks her to slow down a bit. Amidst a mountain range, they find a cave entrance. Beeson tells Turan to come with her to the front, and for the rest to stay back. She then invokes a spell in her hand, illuminating the path through the cave. She asks if there's anyone inside. Asha says there is one person. The group continues walking, until a light illuminates Beeson's face. Torches had now been found, coming face to face with a hooded, shirtless man. He asks what brings them to such an isolated place. Turan asks if it's the arsonist, and Asha confirms. Beeson aims an arrow, saying she'll confirm if he's the murderer who kidnapped and burned the villagers. The man says he doesn't understand what she means, but then he moves his hand, causing a large explosion in front of him. Everyone in the group is thrown back, but the protagonist remains standing with his hand forward, thanks to the artifact, while Beeson still aims her arrow. The arsonist is surprised by this. The arrow is then fired in his direction, hitting the man's leg. The mage quickly falls to the ground. He then tries to move forward, supporting himself with his other hand on the ground. Stone hands begin to emerge from all sides. Turan thinks that he wasn't from a fire bloodline, but the monuments begin to fall as he advances, spinning the slingshot from side to side. The man extends his hand towards him, but the protagonist lands a shot that severs the arm from his body. The man falls to the ground, groaning in pain. Turan uses his electricity magic, hitting the man once more. The arsonist starts to lose consciousness while screaming. Beeson is surprised by this, looking at the protagonist who had already subdued his opponent. She asks if he defeated him, and Turan says probably. Take care of this one. Please check on the others. He then extends his hand, which holds seeds, tossing them to the ground. They begin to bind the arsonist with vines. Turan thinks, I've sealed his sight and movements, so it's over. He then points his knife and tells him to wake up. The man tries to use magic from his mouth, but the protagonist intercepts him, saying if he releases any more mana, he'll take his life on the spot. The arsonist asks who they are and how they got there. Turan says he has his methods and wants to know if he is the arsonist. The man doesn't answer the question, so the protagonist stabs the knife into his thigh, demanding he answer why a rogue noble was burning the residents of this region. The arsonist says that God told him that by burning the flesh and souls of sinners, he could get closer to them. Beeson questions this hypothesis. The arsonist says God taught him the secret to obtaining the power of other bloodlines. Now, if he burns more humans, he will obtain the incendiary bloodline. Beeson says it's madness and asks how someone could obtain bloodlines like that. Turan says that committing so many murders for such a ridiculous reason was something that began to silence his mind with so much hatred. Thinking about what Maidan said, that even ordinary people can obtain power by taking the lives of beasts, and he had seen several mages like that. The arsonist says he just needs to burn a few more, and then he'll have the power. Turan grabs his arm, thinking that perhaps he had discovered the secret of this world.